everyone, just wanted to share a bit of information with you about crafting a literature review. There is quite a bit of information in your textbook, chapters 4 and 5, but what I really wanted to talk about is what's not covered in your text and what your assignment is for this week, which is talking about specifically the table. And as you craft a literature review, what's really important beyond actually creating your topic, which creating and narrowing your topic is an important piece, but also crafting a table from which you'll eventually build your larger review is such an important element. So I wanted to spend some time talking about that and also about literature reviews in general, because as you continue on in your academic career as an undergraduate, and then hopefully if you do go on to graduate school, a literature review is such an important element of your education if you were to go on for perhaps your thesis as an undergrad in the HSA program, or even if you were to go on for a master's or even a doctorate, a literature review will become more and more important. So what is a literature review? A lot of folks think, well, it's a review of literature, like creative literature, Shakespeare, Poe, etc. But it's really not. It's really a review of literature within the scholarly setting. So there's lots of different types of literature, and you've likely seen that from your reading for this week. But it really takes that scholarly literature from the setting, whatever you happen to be looking at. Perhaps since we're talking about health administration, you may be looking at efficiency in physician practices, or hospital readmissions, or something of that nature. And it takes a look at all of the scholarly study that has been done in that area. You kind of search out that information and you summarize it to make a determination to see, well, what's really going on out there? What are researchers looking at? So that's what a literature review is. It's not a review of, fictional literature or even non-fictional literature like books and those types of things. It's really a review of what research is going on in this particular field, typically through journals and that type of work. So what it is not is an annotated bibliography. And this may be something that you're familiar with perhaps from high school time frame, if you did these in high school, or perhaps previous work in undergraduate study. But an annotated bibliography is typically where you're taking a reference. It could be a reference type work of some sort, and then you're summarizing that. So that's an annotated bibliography, and sometimes you might actually talk about the weaknesses of that work. Maybe the study itself didn't have high validity, or it didn't seem like it was reliable, or something of that nature. But that's what an annotated bibliography is. A literature review is definitely not an annotated bibliography. A literature review is something much larger. It is actually an essay. It is a narrative, a written narrative that is built on, and it's typically built from a table. And we start it with a table, kind of like an annotated bibliography type table, but then we build this literature review, which can be many pages long. For example, the literature review as part of my doctoral study was 40 pages long. So it can be a large document that is just a review of major findings in that field, different types of pieces of information. Sometimes you'll talk about various different things, and we'll talk about themes versus author organization of literature reviews. There's different ways to organize it, but it is a narrative work, just like a research paper would be a narrative work, as opposed to just here's an article, here's what it's about, here's an article, here's what it's about. It's a comprehensive narrative work. So why are literature reviews important? Why do we care about them? Well, they let us know what's out there. They tell us what types of information are out there. And as you're doing your literature review, as you're doing that this week and as part of your homework, you'll probably come across literature reviews in your when you're doing your searching, literature reviews are commonly published as scholarly work. You'll see them, they may call them systematic literature reviews, they may call them meta-analyses. That's a very large review where you look at a large topic and do the determination of all of the work in that topic area, where you narrow down what's available. So it allows you to know what's out there and hopefully demonstrate mastery over that subject. What are all the possible works out there? And then, what can I learn about it? And then hopefully they'll allow you to locate your area of research within that literature. So what is out there, what's already been done, and what can I do to research it in this area. So this is why literature reviews are very important to researchers, because what we do as researchers is say, okay, well, Dr. Bob over at Pitt has already looked at this particular topic and this is what he found. I'm looking at something slightly different, and it kind of compares with what he's found, and I have kind of a new way of looking at this particular topic. So here at RMU I'm going to look at this in this way, so we can make comparisons to previous research, and hopefully our new and novel research will show something different. So that's why literature reviews are important to researchers. As students, even if we're not doing research, literature reviews are very important to us as well, because it helps us to master a particular topic. Long literature reviews, like I had said, literature reviews can be very long. I've seen some in dissertations that are 60, 70 pages long, so they can be very long. So a literature review for a thesis or a dissertation can be very long. Some journal articles, like those meta-analyses, they can be quite long as well. They can have dozens of cited studies. They can have 100 cited studies. They can have an innumerable number of studies cited, and they will typically be organized by theme. So you'll see the different themes throughout those studies, or throughout the actual how the review has gone on as they've looked throughout all the studies that they have pulled from their databases. And we'll take a look at the databases and where you might be able to find some works. They'll say, okay, well, across all of these works that I've looked at for this particular topic, I've found these themes, and they'll organize them by theme. And I'll actually talk a little bit about my own work and how that was organized by theme. Sometimes a shorter literature review, 10 or less studies, are sometimes organized by author, but to be honest, thematic organization is really considered better, because when you're organizing by author, it's still going to look a lot more like an annotated bibliography, where you're really just talking about the authors and what they have studied. If you organize it by theme, it shows that you've really dug into the research, you're understanding what's within those studies, and you're able to put themes together as to what's in there. Now sometimes the authors themselves can be the themes. Maybe you have one author that's done 4 or 5 different studies, and this is how the theme moves forward. Well, this particular researcher has done these several studies, and there's a theme across them, and then another researcher has done several studies and there's a theme across them. So you may have kind of a balance between author and thematic organization, and that is okay as well. So obviously, to organize by author, you're going to be discussing one author at a time, but those complex and academic literature reviews are organized by theme to gather that info, as we just talked about. So when you're going to be writing a thesis or a dissertation, which is not necessarily what our task is this week, but just for general knowledge, you need to understand how your research that you're going to be doing as part of your thesis or your dissertation, or if you do get involved in undergraduate research, how is your research integral to the field? And that's where the literature review comes from, or it is working toward. How can you justify that your study is important? So it could close gaps in existing research, it can test various aspects of theories, it can replicate an important study. So maybe somebody else did the study several years ago, you want to replicate that. Or you could retest a hypothesis that's been tested before, but maybe you have a newer and improved methodology. It can resolve conflicts in the field. So if one researcher has done a study, another researcher has done another study, and those two studies are conflicting, you can help to resolve conflicts. And sometimes you can create original research. It's rare that you're going to be creating original research, but especially in the medical field, from a clinical research standpoint, there's plenty of original clinical research that is still going on because we're always uncovering new different types of diseases, new different types of pathology processes that are ongoing, and so there's always new drugs, new technologies, new things coming out. So from a clinical research standpoint, there is original research. From a efficiency standpoint, those types of things, there's less original research going on there because we've tested so many things. So that's why we need to do a comprehensive literature review when we do plan to do research to see what is out there, because there's not as much original research still going on. So how do we get started? Well, you want to establish a general field of research. So for example, let's say I'm interested in physician services and specifically in efficiency. Maybe I'm interested in the fact that physician practices don't seem to run very efficiently. So how can I help to improve that? I want to look at that topic. So we can start by just searching on some of those areas. And you don't have to narrow it down right away. Maybe as I start looking for articles, I find that it has to do with front desk processes. Maybe I find that it has to do with scheduling processes. But I don't necessarily have to narrow it right away. The best thing is to just start looking at articles in general and making a determination from there. So where you want to start is by looking at peer-reviewed journals. You do not want to look at Wikipedia. I do not ever. Sometimes I look at Wikipedia just to get general knowledge on things, but it's never anything you want to cite. It's never anything you want to rely on, because anybody in the world can go in and make changes to Wikipedia. So you don't actually have to have any specific knowledge base to make changes to Wikipedia. I could go in and make changes to Wikipedia about classical music, or about cardiology, the actual clinical realm of cardiology, and neither of those two things do I have any expertise in. So but I could go in and make changes to it. So it's very important that you make sure that you don't use Wikipedia as an actual reference, but sometimes Wikipedia is not a bad thing to give you a general idea. The best thing, absolute best thing to do is to go to the library databases. So as a student at RMU, you have access to library databases. There are very field-specific databases. There are general databases, but I'm going to click here and see if we can get into the library databases. So out on the web, right here on this very main page, if you just go library.rmu.edu, takes you right to the main page of the library. And if you go here, right in this main discovery box, you can search for information. You can search databases A to Z, you can search in databases by subject. I often, if I'm just doing a general search, I might start right here. So since we were talking about physician practices and efficiency, so I may put physician practice, and then I'm going to do an operator. You can do operators of and operators of or. When you do an and operator, let me put the rest of that in. When you put an and operator, this means that it's going to search for both physician practice and efficiency as keywords in articles. So it's going to be looking for both of those things. If you put an or, it would look for physician practice or efficiency, obviously. So you're going to find articles on efficiency, you're going to find articles on physician practices. This is going to be looking for a combination of the two. So let's just do a search. Oh, and it wants my information, so we'll log in there. And it doesn't like it. Okay, so look at this. Right away, we've got a whole cadre of articles. And over here you'll see that this comes from an academic journal. This is a great way to go. Sometimes I'll even go over here and just click only give me peer-reviewed journals, because you will sometimes get newspaper articles. You'll get things that aren't from peer-reviewed journals. So you can click that you only want things from peer-reviewed journals. But so here we have a great listing of articles to take a peek at. So we have, improving physician practice efficiency by learning lab test ordering patterns, cost and technical efficiency of physician practices, what factors affect the productivity and efficiency of physician practices. Let's just click on that one and see what that is. So this is in the Medical Care Journal. And let's see if we have access to this particular article. So hopefully we'll have access to it. So this was, we're looking for the February 1st, 2010 version. So let's go to the February 2010. And there we go. There's our, so what I'm just going to click read online, but you can download it. We're just going to read it online. So there's our article right there. Talks about productivity and efficiency of physician practices, and we've got our entire article there. We can click forward to the different pages. So that's one great way that we can get access to articles and find exactly, we could narrow down, and obviously there are many more pages of articles to go through, but we can find some articles. Obviously this was just number 5 of 643 articles that it pulled for us. So a great way to gather articles using the RMU library. Excellent resource. Just some general guidelines when you're thinking about doing these types of searches. You probably want to start with the most recent works and work backwards. When you're looking at different textbooks and different folks that talk about literature reviews, they suggest using a 5-year span from the present. I don't hold fast to that. Sometimes I'll go back 10 years. It depends on what exactly you're looking at. With healthcare, because it changes so rapidly, 5 years is probably a good time frame. But if you find you're not finding enough works within your 5-year time frame, I may go back a little bit further. But 5 years is typically a good time frame for healthcare, because things change so rapidly in healthcare. You don't want to go back too far in looking at research works. What you often want to do is start by reading through abstracts rather than reading through the whole article, because by reading through the abstract you can really get a feel for what's going on in that article. And a good way to read through abstracts is to go to Google Scholar. So you can go to Google Scholar instead of going to the RMU library. You could start at Google Scholar, and it's a great site to gather abstracts. So Google Scholar, we'll pop back out to the internet here. If you just go to Google Scholar, scholar.google.com, it looks like a regular Google site, except this specifically searches scholarly articles. So you could type in, we can type in the same items that we just did, and see we get a whole gaggle of different articles than we had before. However, what we will typically get here is just the abstract. So we don't have the entire article all we have is the abstract. Once we know what article we might want, if we came through this and we were like, yeah, this seems like a really interesting article, what we would want to do is take that citation and then go back to the RMU library, plug that citation in here and see if we have the article. And if we don't have the article, talk to the reference librarian, and they can usually get it for us from one of the other libraries that we are connected to. So make sure that you take advantage of that opportunity. They can usually find those articles for us. So Google Scholar, great opportunity to gather information. It's a different way to search for items. And always look for major figures in the field and major studies and articles. For example, when we'll take a look at my literature review, there are some people that really jump out as the major figures in the field that I studied, which was a wellness area. They were clearly the players in that area. So you want to really, if you see someone doing a lot of study in a specific area, make sure that you're including them in your literature review. So literature reviews will ultimately be focused. So you may start out with a really broad topic like physician practices and efficiency, but ultimately you're going to focus that down. So you're not going to just talk about physician practices and efficiency, you're going to focus that down into a narrow topic. And so you may decide to look at lab tests and how that is more efficient, or how the scheduling affects efficiency, or how the front desk affects the efficiency. So you're eventually going to be narrowing that down. Now, for purposes of our assignment this week, you may not have a super narrow topic, and that's perfectly fine. And you may narrow your topic. As you'll find throughout this course, we will be following the same topic throughout the whole course. You may find that you will narrow your topic down, and that's okay. But at this point, don't go with a super broad topic. Try and narrow it a little bit. Don't just say you want to cover hospitals. You want to have that narrowed a little bit down to something slightly more narrow. So for purposes of our assignment this week, you're not going to be writing a narrative literature review. Obviously, that takes time. That's a time-consuming process, and we're not going to be doing that this week. But what we are going to do is start to gather some references on a topic of your choice, and that's detailed in the classroom. But we're going to start to gather some references and build a table, because typically we will build a table from which once that table is filled out, then we will take that and build our narrative. So I've given an example here on the slide, and there's also this template lives in the classroom. You don't have to use this exact template. I'll show you a couple of different examples. Actually, my own personal table that I used for a literature review that I did, as well as another example that we have here, and you'll see that those both look different than this. So choose whichever you would like. If you find others online, as long as it gives us, you can see here we have the reference. That's going to be the reference. You want to put it in APA format, because that's what we use here at RMU in the HSA program. So you want your reference, and you want to have that in APA format. And then the purpose of the study. What is the study? Give us a description of what's going on. Then what is the sample? So the sample of the study, who's involved, what's going on with the study itself, and then what was the outcome? So what was the outcome of this particular study that we're looking at? And then up here you've got a room to put your research question or issue. So I just have some example, one-line example. So like I said, reference. You want to have your APA cited reference, and this one I have Elliott et al. 2004. I've just given a short version of it. I would advise, because unless you're going to give me the long list of references below, I would probably advise giving the full reference, APA reference, for the specific piece of literature that you're referencing. The purpose of the study in this case, it was a study of the implementation of various formats of workplace wellness programs in the career fire service to determine effectiveness. The sample was 33 career firefighters, and the outcome of the study They found improvements in team and one-on-one interventions. Team-based was great for increasing exercise habits. Mood levels increased and depression decreased with those that had one-on-one sessions, but both intervention groups had improved health over the control group. So good results were found in the interventions, and you can see it. I didn't give a ton of detail, I just gave a little bit of information over what had happened in that particular study. And actually let me show you the this is my table that I built for that particular literature review. So you can see, let's see if I can blow this up a bit more. You can see how my table looks a little bit different. I had the study, the design, so what type of a design was it? Quasi-experimental, prospective trial, case study, etc. I had the participants, the location of where it was, because that was very important in my case, the intervention, what exactly was done during this particular study, and then what the results were. So a slightly different version. And let's go down. I have that particular one that we were just looking at, or was it up here at the top? There it is right there. So this is the one that I had just talked about on that last slide. This was the Elliott et al. Study. So it was a prospective trial. It was the pilot study of the FLAME. It was called the FLAME trial. It was a workplace wellness program for firefighters. The FLAME program. It was a very large NIH-funded program. And so this Elliott et al., you can see that they were a major player. Elliott et al., Elliott et al., Elliott et al. They were a major player in the workplace wellness, that whole area, workplace wellness programs for firefighters. So they were someone that I absolutely had to include in my lit review for this particular study because they were so important. So you always, if you see replicated folks involved in a study or involved in multiple studies, you definitely want to make sure that you have them in your lit review because they are major players in that particular topic area. So very, very important. So this is just another example. And then what I did was I actually took this and then built on this into an actual article. So the article itself was a narrative, a long narrative, and I actually built this table into that narrative as well, so you could see both the narrative and this table format. So, and that was actually ended up being sent off to a journal for publication. So, so it was the narrative, it was this table, and then it was sent off to a journal for publication. So let's take a look back at our slide here. We do have one other example. This is probably a little more, to look a little more like what you'll want to be doing for this week. We have the source, and in this case you can see we have an actual full reference. The reason I don't have a full reference in my example is because I had my references in a reference table at the end of my article. So I was just giving a short reference in my table. You'll want to list the full reference in your table at this point because you want the reader to be able to go out and find that article. This is going to give them a small picture. You want the reader to be able to go find the article and read the whole thing if they want. So provide the APA formatted reference. These are not necessarily APA formatted, but you want to do the APA formatted reference for the source of your article. This one happens to be sample, study description. I believe ours says purpose, but they all are kind of the same thing. Why was the study done? What was it about? Or this is the sample. We have these flip-flopped. So the study description and the sample go here. Then the purpose. So this was, we'll take this one shorter, to compare the mortality and morbidity of late preterm infants to those born at term. So that was the purpose of the study. What was the particular purpose for that study? And then the last column is results. So what happened? What did they find in that particular study? So it's just a table to give us information upon which to base our eventual narrative literature review. So once that table's completed, be it the table like we just looked at, the other table that I had shown, you're going to then build that detailed narrative. And hopefully what you're able to find by looking at these tables and looking across these results are themes. So for example, on the table that I had here, which I'll zip back to for a moment, when I looked across these tables or across these studies, which were all about workplace wellness programs for firefighters, certain themes came out. There were themes that had to do with interventions that had to do with nutrition, interventions that had to do with physical fitness, with working out, exercising, and interventions that had to do with health screenings. So those were kind of my three themes that went across those. And then in amongst each of those three themes, there were kind of sub-themes about team-based interventions. There were things that were going on with the firefighters as a group, and then one-on-one interventions, things that were going on with the firefighters one-on-one. So I had a kind of a main theme and then sub-themes. So that's what I found across my studies by looking at all of them, and then I kind of just gave it a glance over and say, okay, what's similar across these? Oh, well, it looks like most of them look at nutrition, most of them look at exercise, most of them look at health screenings, and most of them compare team-based interventions to one-on-one interventions. So that's really what I found. So that's how I was able to create my narrative based on themes. But sometimes if you only have 3 or 4 articles, you're not able to create themes. Or that could also be how you find that you don't have your topic narrowed enough. If you're not able to create themes because the articles are very disparate. So you may find that that's why your topic is not quite narrow enough yet. You need to narrow it down more. So once you have your table completed, then you would create a detailed narrative based on themes or the author, if that's the way you need to go. But for purposes of this week's assignment, we're only going to be completing the table. 3 to 5 references in your topic area that you've chosen. It's also the topic you're talking about in your discussion boards, and that is going to be our assignment for this week. So that is the end of our presentation. Hopefully it was a little bit helpful to help you understand a little more about the literature review. Chapters 4 and 5 in the text talk about literature reviews in general. That's chapter 4. Chapter 5 talks about the systematic literature review with the establishment of a PICO question, very detailed discussion of the systematic literature review. Great information in there. We're not going to be delving into the literature review at that level of detail, and that's why I wanted to give you kind of this more generic overview of go to the library, pick a topic, go to the library, grab out some articles, review them, and then build a table. And that's a great way to start a literature review. So any questions, get in touch with your professor and get started reviewing in the library, and that's a great way to start on your literature review.